What is up everyone, Barricade here, and I'm bringing you guys another episode of Gears of War lore. Today we're going to be talking about the Gears Ascendance novel, and essentially what I decided on doing is the book is actually split up in 3 acts. So I'm going to make 3 videos talking about the novel itself and expressing the story and what happens in each act. So we're going to go ahead and get started here with Act 1, of course, and it's very interesting on how the story starts off. So right after Gears 4, they recovered Reyna's body, and it's pretty much like the very next night following to the next day, and they decide to bury her in a nearby cave. And it was kind of sad how the book expressed it. They essentially buried her in the cave and then blocked it off by essentially building a wall of rocks, putting all the rocks together and building a burial site for her that would essentially serve as a tomb for her. And the way the book described it was after they recovered her body, they actually were kind of taking a break, and they decided to kind of just relax and have the night off. But Kait couldn't stand it. She just couldn't handle it, and that's when she started having her nightmares. And she couldn't sleep, and she couldn't stop thinking about what just had happened several hours before, about her mother dying, the swarm. It's literally right after Gears 4. So she wakes up in the middle of the night and decides, I'm going to start working on the burial site now. So she starts, building the wall and everything right then and there in the middle of the night. And then JD and Dell notice, so they go to help her. And then Marcus and Sam, Baird, Cole, they all just eventually just come and help her out and start building the wall right in the middle of the night, without even saying anything to each other. They just all kind of had a weird little mutual feeling there, where they just had to all work on it at that moment once they saw that Kait wasn't going to sleep and they just needed to get it done. Once it was completed, it was already in the day now, and Kait said her goodbyes, and it was really sad. She just put her hand on the wall, and everyone kind of followed suit and all put their hand on the wall as a sign of respect and gave their silent goodbye. And even though Marcus and Cole and Barrett, all of them didn't even really know her, besides obviously Kait, JD, and Dell, all of the other ones never even met Reyna, but they still gave her a sign of respect and said goodbye. And then now they finally decided to move on and get back to New Ephyra. And this was the part that I was kind of confused on, because it was essentially stated it was like right after Gears 4, but they never mentioned anything about the giant robots. Like, if you remember at the end of Gears 4, they used a big ass giant robots to fight the final boss, and that was one thing that was basically giving them a huge mode of transportation. I don't know, maybe I don't remember exactly, but I don't remember the robots getting destroyed. I could be wrong, but they didn't have them, so there's like no mention of the giant robots. So they decided to make their route back to New Ephyra, but they need to get supplies and food and everything. So Kait kind of convinces everybody to go into a spot that she knows of, a shack kind of in the middle of a forest that would give them everything they need, and even possibly even a way to communicate back to New Ephyra to get home. And it was kind of funny, because when they were getting ready to leave, Cole tells Marcus, "So where to?" Like asking him, "Where are we going?" And Marcus looks at him weird and goes, "I'm not in charge." And Cole tells him, "You're always in charge, baby." So kind of funny how they, no matter what, Cole always sees him as a leader, and even tells him, even when you're outranked, you're still a leader. So it's kind of funny how they have that respect for Marcus. But regardless, they listen to Kait and they go through the forest to go and possibly get supplies and a way to communicate. As they're making their way through the forest, everything seems all well, but out of nowhere they can see that in the distance, in the open field, they can see something moving within the grass towards them. A lot of them kind of all coming at once from different angles. So they get, obviously take point, and it turns out that it's a swarm of juvies. So it's just a bunch of juvies rushing at them. So they all take out their weapons, everything. The one thing that was kind of interesting is they stated that Kait literally had less than a half of a clip in her Lancer and was just kind of making burst shots, very, very precise shots, and getting kills. And they actually had to kind of work together and make sure that they didn't run out of ammo. Baird was actually using a buzzkill, shooting it throughout the trees, and I love how the book described it. I just imagine it, just a huge barrage of blades going through trees, cutting trees down, cutting swarm juvies in half, and it was really intense. Sam had her Nasher, and they were just all kind of going off. And the really cool part that I remember in the battle that was really distinct was they said that Cole was using his chainsaw, kind of just in the middle of the battlefield, just going off with his chainsaw, but then eventually switched to a combat knife and started just running up to them and just straight up, hand to hand with a knife. And then we had Marcus and, everybody just using their guns and chainsaws. Really interesting battle. But they see that even after the first wave of the juvies, they aren't stopping. There's just more and more coming, so they make a retreat through the trees, and they eventually get to a part where they're getting through a swamp, and Kait knew a specific path to get them to a safe spot, so she literally screams at everybody to follow her exact path and to do exactly what she does. So she runs straight and goes a specific way through the swamp, and everyone follows suit, so they all get through it fine. But it turns out that in that swamp there's specific spots that are really deep, and if you fall into it, you can basically sink. So as they're running and getting chased by the juvies are just rushing at them blindly, and a lot of them are falling into those very deep parts of the swamp and dying. And I think that's really funny. I love how the book described it. It stated that some juvies were actually getting wise to this and stopping at the very edge of when it was about to get deep, but all the juvies behind them were too much of a frenzy, and they would bump into each other and knock each other into the deep ends of the swamp, essentially killing each other. So it was actually pretty kind of funny how the book described it. And the thing that after all of that, they eventually make it to that shack or the building, whichever you want to call it, and they find supplies and everything they need, and they're able to radio for a Raven. So a Raven eventually comes and takes them back to New Ephyra. And the thing that was really cool how they described it was Kait is an outsider, so she's never really been to like a major city, nothing really crazy big. Her whole life has been the wilderness and being in a small village. So as they're making it to New Ephyra, the way the book describes it is that Old Ephyra, basically the areas that we saw in like Gears 1, the destroyed cities and everything, kind of is off to the side, and then right next to Old Ephyra is New Ephyra, and New Ephyra is extremely gigantic. It's like a huge city with ridiculously high skyscrapers, a beautiful environment. It's just huge and prosperous, and all of it was very overwhelming for her because she'd never seen anything like this in her life. And she just kind of stood there behind the pallets of the helicopter because she was just really in awe as she watched the city. And they basically told her to sit down, and she's like, I'm good. So she was just sitting there watching the city as they flew over it, and they made it to Baird's estate. Baird, essentially seeing as he is the developer and manufacturer, main guy of the DBs, he's extremely rich. So he has a ridiculously huge mansion, and they make it to New Ephyra. And as soon as they get there, the thing that was really kind of, insane is that as soon as they get off, there's a huge lineup of DBs. And then right in the center of it, of course, is a DB with Jin's face on it. And she tells them that she wants everybody to meet up with her for a debriefing. And she tells them that nobody's allowed to leave Baird's estate because she doesn't want anybody to know about the swarm yet. It's top secret, and she kind of gives the impression that she wants to keep it covered and wants no one to know, because it would create a panic knowing that the locusts are essentially back in a new form as the swarm. So she tells everybody they have to stay there, no one's allowed to leave. So they all kind of just stay at Baird's estate, and then eventually go to Jin's main office in the very center of the city. It's this big, huge governmental building that she runs, and they have to go in there and go into a meeting and meet Jin for this big debriefing. The one thing that was really interesting that I really want to talk about right away is the fact that when they went to the debriefing, Kait notices that Jin is pregnant. And then it kind of brings back a very important fact that they talked about in the novel that was never explored in the game, which is extremely interesting. Turns out that Anya Stroud, Marcus's wife, was in fact the first minister before Jin. Jin was her protege, and before Anya's death, she listened and learned from Anya. So Anya was literally the big cheese of the cog at one point. And the thing that led to Anya being able to have children was actually Jin's technology. So one thing that was extremely interesting is, if you guys didn't know, in the novels they stated that Anya was barren. She was never able to have children, and it was confirmed. And it was the major reason to why she was able to even be in the cog, because if you guys didn't know, the comics established that a lot of women were basically forced to have children and put in birthing camps. But yeah, Anya was not. and it turns out that it was because she was barren, so they had more of a use of her to be in the cog. She's extremely intelligent and helpful towards them, so that's one of the reasons why they kept her. But after Gears 3, after the Locust War, Jin created a technology that would help people have babies. And that's when their whole program and everything, as we saw in Gears 4, there was parts where we saw, like, you know, do your part and things like that. I remember seeing something like that where you'd go to the hospital and it talked about, you know, women having babies. And that was all Jin's doing. She created technology that would somehow make barren women be able to have children. And she used it on Anya, thus giving her the ability to have JD. So that was the one thing that I just wanted to bring up real quick here. As Kait was going into the office and saw Jin pregnant, that was one thing that kind of sparked up that very important fact. And the debriefing goes over pretty insanely because they kind of have a big disagreement with Jin. She pretty much states that she doesn't want anybody to know. They're going to keep it on the wraps. She's going to essentially try to cover it up, is what it sounds like. And she's sending out, you know, scouts and DBs and everything to investigate the areas and to try to isolate it and get rid of it, essentially. And Baird is actually pissed at Jin for using his DBs to attack Marcus and JD and Kay and Dell. And he kind of throws the thing in her face that his deal is that they're not allowed to use weapons against humans, basically. And then Jin, being the jerk she is, kind of interjects and basically tells them, as long as they're part of the cog. So since they were considered criminals, she was essentially allowed to use his robots to kill anybody as long as they're not a cog citizen. Essentially, the debriefing ends with them all agreeing to go back to Baird's estate and to kind of wait everything out. But as everyone is leaving, she tells JD and Dell to wait and to meet her at her office. So they're basically sweating bullets because they're like, okay, what's happening next? Are we going to get arrested? What exactly is going to happen? So everybody has to go home back with Baird, and JD and Dell just simply have to wait and speak with her. Well, they walk into her office and she's writing something on paper, signing stuff, and just kind of doing paperwork right in front of them, and they have to sit there for a while wondering what the hell they're sitting there for. And they eventually ask her, you know, so what's going on? And she just slaps the papers in front of them and tells them, oh, you're both pardoned. And they're like, what? And they're very confused because of the fact that she's literally letting them get away with everything that they did. And while they weren't the people that stole, you know, her people, it was the swarm, they still did a lot of things that would constitute them as criminals. So the fact that she was just going to let them go was a big surprise to them. And they were about to sign and be like, okay, and they're happy, but then they realize that, of course, someone like Jin makes this into a huge caveat. And what it is simply is the fact that if they sign it, they're free and good to go, no, you know, charges. But it turns out that they're essentially signing themselves away, reinstating their ranks, and now have to be in the cog. And the only alternative is to not sign it and be sent to prison. So they're forced. They don't really have a choice at all. So they have to sit there, think about it for a few minutes. Dell is really adamant about not doing it. He seems really against it, but JD basically tells him, we have to do this because if we're in prison, she's going to go after the swarm. Jin is going to go after the swarm and do things the wrong way, whereas if they sign it and they're in the cog, they can kind of point things in the right direction and get everything taken care of properly. So reluctantly, Dell signs it with JD, and now they're reinstated in the cog. During this whole time while this is happening, they're stuck there, you know, doing all this paperwork. And on the opposite end of the story, we see that Kait and everyone is back at Baird's estate. Kait can't sleep. She's having nightmares. She's freaking out, and she just can't sleep at all. So she goes out in the gardens of Baird's estate and kind of tries to see if she can walk around in the city. The DBs don't let her, of course, so she has to stay in Baird's estate and walk around in his gardens. As she's walking around, she hears somebody call out to her, and it's Marcus sitting at a table. They sit there and start drinking wine and just kind of talking and conversing with each other. And then as they're relaxing and just kind of helping her get her mind at ease, Baird comes out of nowhere and tells both of them to follow me. Let's go. I got something I need to show you guys. So he takes them into what looks just like a simple like shack. Doesn't look like there's anything special about it. But of course, knowing Baird, he pushes something and essentially a huge staircase comes up, and then they go underground. And it turns out it's the underground lab that we saw at the beginning of Gears 4. If you guys remember the beginning of Gears 4, when he was watching JD and Kait through his monitors, that's where he was. He was in that secret lab underground in his estate. Well, while they go down there, he turns on some video feeds that are coming up on his screen, and it turns out that what's going on essentially is that Jin has sent a lot of DBs back to Kait's village to investigate to see what is happening. The thing is, Baird is not supposed to do that. He's not supposed to be able to tap into the feeds. Yes, he created the robots and everything, but he's not supposed to do that. It's something that's, I guess, against the policy or whichever. But knowing Baird, he doesn't give a crap, and he does it anyways because he wants to know what Jin is up to. And it was kind of funny because Marcus asks him basically, "Are you allowed to do this?" And Baird's like, yeah, I'm totally allowed to do this. You know, that's the whole reason why I have a secret lab. Of course I'm not supposed to do this. You know, he kind of like gave Marcus a little attitude about it. It's kind of funny. And so they're sitting there watching the news feeds through the robot's eyes. And essentially the DBs go back to Kait's village and investigate. And you can see some few of the swarm, like Juvies and a Pouncer, but they're dead. And the robots didn't do this. They got there and the Juvies and everything was already dead. So they're kind of like, well, what's happening? What did this? And as they're investigating, the robots get attacked and killed or defeated, whatever you want to call it. They're destroyed. And in the very end of the camera feed, we can see 2 children. They were the ones that did it. There were 2 outsiders that attacked the DBs and killed them. And it turns out that they were twins that Kait knew. If you remember in Gears 4, when she's pushing putting the children into the vault when they thought that the cog was going to come kidnap everybody, Kait asks, you know, what's the count? Where's everybody at? And the young boy tells her, everybody's here except Mackenzie and Eli. And then Kait tells him, well, don't worry about him. He's trading with the South Village. They're trading with the South Village. And it turns out that after everything that happened in Gears 4, when the swarm took everybody, Mackenzie and Eli, twins, a boy and a girl, around 12 years old, 10 to 12 years old, came back after everybody was gone. And they assumed that the cog took them. So they waited, and when the cog came back, they thought the cog were coming for them. So they were the ones that killed the DBs while hiding and being very sneaky. And they're also even the ones that killed the Juvies and the Pouncer. So these kids are pretty relentless. And the video feeds with them basically looking at the DB's eyes and saying, you know, try again, Cog. You know, they're pretty crazy kids. And the video feed ends there. Kait kind of gets in a panic though, because she knows that these 2 young children are staying at the village alone with DBs coming after them and Swarm potentially coming at them as well. Jin sends out a message basically stating that the children are not to be killed, they're not to be harmed, but they are to be taken to a new Ephira. So Kait doesn't really like that idea, and she doesn't trust Jin. So she begs Baird to let her escape, find a way for her to get away so she can get back to the village and get the children and make sure that they're safe. Baird is a little reluctant at first, and he doesn't want to, but eventually Kait does come back and in full armor and everything and ready to go. So he eventually just gives up and decides to help her. So Baird and Sam devise a plan that for every few seconds or so, the DBs and the Guardians flying around will eventually just turn off for about a few seconds. And when they turn off, she can run by them. So she had to go through this really long path to eventually get out of the city, go through the underground paths, and got out. But right when she escaped, she barely made it. And right when she got there, she hears a voice. And the voice is Marcus Phoenix. And she's really kind of surprised to see Marcus at the city limits with her. And she's kind of scared, thinking that Marcus is going to try to take her back. But it turns out that Marcus wants to go with her. He wants to help her. So he tells her, I'm going with you, and we'll figure this out together. And that's essentially how Act 1 ends of the Gears Ascendance novel. So it's getting pretty damn good, guys. I'm really liking this novel a lot, to be honest with you. I don't have time to sit there and read it, so I went the extra step and bought the audiobook and been using it or reading it, whatever you want to listen to it, as I go to work and back, because my drives to work and back are long. So this is getting me through the book pretty damn quick, and I'm loving it. So I'm ready through Act 1, and the book itself is amazing. It's really good, and to be honest, I really recommend you guys buy it and read it, because even though, you know, I could make the videos as much as I like about it, there's still a lot of key things in it that I obviously can't go over everything. Nothing too important, nothing that really needs to be mentioned, but still things that you are missing out on if you don't actually read the book. But overall, guys, if you guys like this video, please definitely hit that like button and subscribe, and tell me what you guys think about the Gears Ascendance story so far. Are you guys interested? It's literally right after Gears 4 leading into Gears 5, so I really can't wait to get through Act 2 and 3 so I can make more videos for you guys. Once again, guys, if you guys like this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you guys can be notified anytime I make a video. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see my most recent Gears of War video, hit that link on the left. If you want to see any of my other content, hit that link on the right. Thanks for watching, guys.